Welcome back to Connect and Collaborate. I'm Alex Hopkins, your on-air producer. And again, today and all week, we are talking legislative session that ended last Wednesday, and we're getting the updates from all the big dogs. We just finished with Senator Chris Hilbert, who is the Senate Majority Leader, who was telling us that he fights with you a lot. You guys brawl it out. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, he's a pretty big guy compared to me, and so, he gets the best of me quite a bit.
There you go. He takes you out at the knees, right?
Yep.
I do have with me Senate President Kevin Grantham. So thank you so much, Kevin, for joining us today.
You bet, of course.
Yeah. So we talked about the big bills with Chris. We talked transportation just a little bit. We definitely talked about the beer bill, which I'm not sure about you, but I was very excited for that to pass. And a little bit about pair-up. So I wanted to get into some different things here with you.
You bet.
Yeah. Do you mind starting off with the budget?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. The budget this year, again, Colorado, we have the balanced budget requirement that every legislative session, every year, we are required to pass a balanced budget for the following fiscal year. And once again, that is our actually one and only constitutional duty that we actually have to get done as a legislature.
Interesting.
And if we don't get it done in 120 days, we'd have to come back sometime before June 30th in order to get it done.
Gotcha.
So we actually did get that done, per usual. It is, again, the largest state budget in the history of Colorado, which is understandable given our size and our growth and particular growth drivers within the budget. That cost drivers that make all these department budgets go up on an annual basis. The total budget, including all funds, the general fund, federal funds, cash funds, totaled close to about $29 billion.
Wow. Now
that compared to the first year when I stepped in the door at the Capitol is about $18 billion. So it's grown by roughly 150%.
Yeah.
Since I walked into the building. With a lot of those automatic cost drivers and escalators that I mentioned. That's the unfortunate part. I still have yet to meet a single individual where their household revenue and budget has gone up by 150% over the last 8 years. It just doesn't happen.
Unfortunately, yeah, right. I don't have that.
So, there's a lot of good things that we were able to get accomplished with the budget. From a Republican standpoint, from a business standpoint. But unfortunately, it is still state tax dollars and still revenue coming from the taxpayers of Colorado. And we still have to be accountable for all of that and all of those dollars. And I think we were able to accomplish that in unprecedented ways this year, actually.
Yeah.
We start talking about roads. We talk about transportation. We talk about the pension system. We walked into this session after the December forecast. When I say the December forecast, the revenue forecast, looking ahead to the 18-19 budget year. These are where the prognosticators, look into their crystal ball and try to guess how much revenue we're going to have in the following fiscal year.
Okay.
Throughout that fiscal. So they're looking 18 months in advance. And we were looking square in the face between the December forecast and the March forecast at roughly $1.2 billion of money over and above what was expected originally, looking back the previous year.
That's a nice little gift.
It is a nice little gift. And the first time we've had anything remotely close to that in my 8 years in the State House. So we had to decide, what are we going to do with this? We have those automatic escalators that are already built into many budget items, and so that's going to eat a chunk out of that.
Yeah.
But we have been harping on, I shouldn't say harping, we've been emphasizing the need for general fund dollars to go into roads, go into bridges, go into transportation.
Yes.
And so we asked for some pretty big dollars on the front end. The roughly $300 million, which is a quarter of that surplus.
Right.
Of course, everybody started screaming over that. Well, we can't do that. Well, of course we should.
Yeah.
the governor came back with a counter offer, basically, of 148 million, which honestly wouldn't get us very far down the road, so to speak.
Exactly.
So that kept going back and forth, and then after the March forecast came in, the revenues were looking even better. And he actually, to his credit, and I heard Chris in the prior segment giving the governor some credit, and he does deserve some credit in this. He came back talking about allocating $500 million towards roads, which we jumped on that, of course, and said, absolutely.
Heck yes.
And we were actually able to successfully set aside $500 million of that, despite what many of the people that like to grab a hold of that money and keep it for themselves in all these departments.
You mean people are money hungry?
Oh, no, not at all. Not at all. I don't want to insinuate anything.
No.
But we were able to get, actually the actual dollar amount was $495 million set aside for this coming fiscal year. That'll go straight into the state highway fund and it'll be split. So about $300 million of that will be into the state highway fund. And then some more will go to the counties and cities, and a little bit more into a multimodal fund.
Right.
That'll be a grant fund for communities around the state to be able to dip into for their own local projects.
Which is exciting, right? That's because a lot of people, I think, forget about rural Colorado when it comes to transportation.
Right.
Yes, we're stuck in Denver traffic. We're stuck in Colorado Springs traffic.
Right.
Not so much in Craig.
Right.
Yeah.
And the needs are different when it comes to multimodal transportation. We call it transit. And unfortunately, the things that are conjured up in our imagination when we talk about transit is mass transit,
right,
and light rail and things like that. Well, that's not what they need in Craig or Springfield or Cortez or up in Julesburg.
Right.
The four corners of the state are very diverse as far as what their needs are when it comes to getting people around their own towns and communities. And so these things can be used to get a senior citizen shuttle.
Right. Or
a disabled shuttle, or a shuttle to get people back and forth to the doctors, because they may not even have a doctor in their town. And so they may need to shuttle people 10, 20, 30, 40 miles away in order to get to hospital services or to some other kind of services, or even to the grocery store. But that's up to them, and they can access those grant dollars now where they can provide for their community as they see fit.
Right.
And if Boulder wants to put, golden-plated gondolas across Main Street, that's up to them. They have to answer to their voters when they do that. But the people in Craig and Springfield, et cetera, will also answer to theirs on how they use their dollars for transit. So that is actually very exciting.
It is.
And I think the majority leader may have covered some of the other details as far as the potential for future transportation dollars and bonding, et cetera. So a lot of exciting potential here, and something we haven't accomplished in Colorado in probably 25, 30 years in regards to road funding.
Exactly. Well, and it's all very exciting. We've grown twice our size.
Yeah.
Right? Over the last year, 2 years, maybe?
Well, yeah, I mean, we are certainly growing exponentially. I think it's been over the last 10 to 15 years. We haven't doubled in the last 10 to 15, but we have grown substantially.
Yes.
To the point where we're outpacing our neighbors in growth. The unfortunate statistic is that our road system and our highway system is built for about 3 million people.
Right.
And we have 5.5 million people.
Exactly.
So that's a problem. And it's an obvious problem, and we see it every day when we try to get out into traffic. So that's one of the things we're trying to fix. How are we going to move people? When we get stuck in traffic between Castle Rock and Monument, we're reminded of it every day.
Yes.
And if we're heading up Floyd Hill, heading west out of town, heading to the ski resorts or to the gaming towns, same thing.
Yeah.
And it's troublesome. And ski season or summer season, it's a problem heading west out of Denver.
It sure is. Well, and you know, for a little relief, I actually really enjoy yelling at people from my car. Keep the windows rolled up and not offending anyone, but I yell a lot, and by the time I get to work, I'm in a good mood because I've gotten to yell at everyone the whole way.
Get it all out of your system. Get it all out.
Yeah. So you do have a slew of bills here that you wanted to maybe talk about a little bit.
Well, you bet. You know, obviously, I've already talked about the transportation. Senate Bill 1 was key for us.
Huge.
We made a lot of promises at the beginning of the session and a lot of goals that we set out in front of us. My opening day speech talked about roads, talked about para, talked about rural broadband, talked about the energy office. We talked about all of these things, and we got each and every single one of them done. Not completely, not that we are done with the topic forever.
Of course not.
These are all maintenance issues that we have to keep our eye on year after year after year. But we did some unprecedented work this year in a legislature that is split with a Democrat governor, and the Senate Republicans did a great job, and the team that I have working with me did a fantastic job of moving those things forward. Senate Bill 1, roads.
Yeah.
We introduced that on day one of the session, and it was finalized on day 120 out of 120.
Yeah.
And it took a lot of work getting from start to finish on that. But at the end of the day, we got a transportation package together that wasn't exactly what I would have hoped for from the beginning, but we got something done that both chambers could get on board with. Right.
Yeah.
Senate Bill 2, rural broadband. We're able to convert the high cost support mechanism fund over into a rural broadband fund and repurpose that so that it's actually doing what it's intended to do.
Wow. Okay.
And put the rural parts of Colorado back into the 20th century, let alone the 21st century.
Right.
I ask people all the time, do you realize that there are places in Colorado where they still use dial-up internet service? It's remarkable to me that there's any place on the planet left like that.
Yeah.
But let alone within
right
easy driving distance from where we sit right here.
Right.
So when we start talking about hospitals needing access to healthcare databases and telemedicine and things like that, we talk about schools and elementaries that are trying to get their one or two computers in the entire school logged onto the internet and get kids access to basic stuff, and they have to use dial-up.
Right.
These are the things that we have to remedy out in rural Colorado and get them back on some level playing field with the Front Range. And Senate Bill 2 is actually very key in making that happen. Senate Bill 3 reauthorizes the Colorado Energy Office. Colorado Energy Office has been notable in recent years. I use that tongue-in-cheek. Yes. Because they've been thumbing the scale for such a long time for the green energy giants, the Solyndras, the solar wing of the green energy industry, and the wind energy industry, the Vestas part of the industry. So they've been thumbing that part of the scale for upwards of a decade now. And we were actually able to take that office and in statute trim off some of the fat, some of the statutes and programs that were not even used ever. Right. And get rid of those and then repurpose the office to an all of the above office.
Which is exciting, really.
Right.
That's, in my opinion, the best of both worlds.
Right.
Yeah.
That is what we've been needing to do for a long time. It's not about being anti-solar or anti-wind. It's about looking at whatever energy strategies are available to us to lessen the cost of energy at the meter for the consumer. Right. And if it's not all of the above, we don't have everything on the table, then we're not giving the consumer, the ratepayer, the best possible choices and the best possible rates that they could pay. Right. And so we have been able to accomplish that, which we promised to do. Yeah. Whether it's wind or solar or coal, oil, natural gas, nuclear, hydro, all of these things are going to be under the purview and given even weighting by the Energy Office to seek out and search for and to develop here in Colorado for the ratepayer. I even suggested that perhaps, if it were possible, and if it's not too volatile, that we try to capture the hot air rising off the Capitol dome.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of that happening. But those people that I suggest that to are a little apprehensive over the volatile nature of that hot air.
You don't know what kind of poison is in that. You're right.
Poison, yes, exactly. You have heard of it.
I have.
Senate Bill 200.
Yes.
Para reform, another promise that we made and accomplished.
Yeah.
We had so many naysayers on transportation and para. It was unfathomable.
It's mind-boggling to me.
Right. They just said, don't even, good luck, pat me on the head and say, yeah, sure, you'll get something done. But, huge credit on Senate Bill 1 roads to Senator John Cook and a large team of people in our caucus that were working on that. But he was leading the way.
Yeah.
Rural broadband, Jerry Sonnenberg, Don Coram, and Senate Bill 3, Ray Scott from Grand Junction.
Yeah.
But when we look at Senate Bill 200, Jack Tate from Arapahoe County, he was instrumental. He was leading the charge the entire way before session, putting this together, getting the team together, getting stakeholders together, and keeping them talking, which is the tough part because there are some very divergent views when it comes to para reform. Yes. He kept them at the table. He kept them talking. And we ended up with moving the needle on para to such an extent that I don't think anybody would have believed that we were able to get as far as we did.
Yeah, I think people are pretty shocked about it, actually.
It's not as far as we wanted. It's not even as far as the Senate bill we sent over.
Yeah. But it's something, and it's a step in the direction.
It is. Yeah. And I remind people that, again, this is a maintenance thing where we have to keep our eyes on this because markets change, circumstances change, and so we have to keep our eye on the ball and where we are at year after year. But we did more than just put a Band-Aid on this.
Yeah.
But we did less than a total fix.
There you go.
And so we have
we're in
to.
A cast.
Yes.
Yeah.
We made progress, and we made good progress. One of the things, going back to the budget, the $1.2 billion surplus, 495 of that ended up going into roads, and 225 of that is going into para.
Yes.
As part of the taxpayer/employer contribution to taking back down the unfunded liability.
And just to reiterate what Senator Hobart said, that is not raising taxes, it's reallocating that money.
Reallocating that money. Yeah. That's money that was already spent by the taxpayer, and because of a better economy, people spending more money shopping, we're getting that money in, and to the tune of $1.2 billion extra. Yeah. Yes, party time. And so the 225 of that is going to help reduce the unfunded liability in para.
Exciting.
Which is actually a more transparent way of doing it than the simple sliver off the top of everybody's paycheck from the employer contribution. Having it come in through that is less transparent to the taxpayer and how their dollars are being spent to pay someone else's liability, which is contentious when you start using the taxpayer money to pay off somebody else's bad mistakes, which is what we're doing with para. But there's other things. I think the majority leader may have mentioned the age 64, bumping that up.
Yeah.
We were hoping for 65. We ended up with 64. That's pretty good.
Up from 58, I feel like that's that's a compromise we can make.
It's a monumental shift, and the COLA suspension for 3 years, and then a cap at 1.5 on COLA increases after that. So that's a substantial change from where we were. The average salary going from 3 years up to 5 years, so that if I spend the last 3 years prior to this bill, if I was a state employee and I got moved into a new job, all I needed to do was hold that job at that higher salary for 3 years, and then my entire career was assumed to be at that salary level.
Oh.
And so we moved that to 5 years, so that last 5-year salary average. So if I made 10,000, then 100,000 and 100,000, you know.
Right.
It's averaging over 5 years to try to capture what your
Real.
actual salary was. We wanted 7.
Yeah.
But all of that, imagine, like looking probably over to this next room, there's probably a soundboard.
Yeah.
And all the knobs and dials and levers, that is what we were doing on Para. And everything that you turn, and everything you adjust ends up with a different output.
Right.
And there is a lot of things to change when you're talking about how much is coming in, how much is going out, and where that's coming from, where that's going to.
Yeah.
And all of these things, Jack Tate was just masterful at getting that through the process and getting that across the finish line. And we made some unprecedented reform when it comes to our pension here in Colorado.
Which is so exciting.
It is. It really is. Giving some sustainability, some stability, predictability.
Yes.
When it comes to our pension, that's vital.
It is vital.
For our workers, for our state, for the taxpayer.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, who's going to be on the hook for this? It'll be the taxpayer who's on the hook for this.
Yeah.
Because we've made promises, honestly, that we couldn't keep under the current circumstances and the laundry list of promises that had been made. And so we have to adjust this to save it for everybody.
Yes. And definitely on the right path. As we said, we're in a cast. We're healing.
Yes. Yes. A little bit better cast now that we have than we had a few months ago. But we're very pleased with where we ended up. So
now I got to ask you, as you know, coming into an election year.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and this probably doesn't have much to do with the session, but moving forward, what's that going to look like for if we switch to a Republican governor?
You know, I certainly won't be complaining. I think that'll give us a clear advantage in many ways. We haven't had too many Republican governors in the last 40-some years.
Yeah.
One for 8 years, in fact, since 1974.
Wow.
And that was Governor Bill Owens. And so I think it would be a remarkable thing that if we could get a good Republican governor like a Walker Stapleton elected. There's a lot of good candidates still in the primary. But I think a good pro-business kind of governor like that would be an excellent move for the state and take us in the right direction to maximize the potential that we're having right now with a good economy.
Yeah.
The tax cuts that have come down from Washington, D.C., let's double down on those and let's get businesses here into Colorado, and let's do everything we can to make it an even more attractive place to be. People love Colorado anyway. If we make it a super business-friendly environment, we can go bonkers, and we will have just the best economy in the union.
I absolutely wholeheartedly agree with you. I think Colorado's a great place. Not a native. I am a transplant here.
Did you get here as quick as you could?
8 years ago. I feel pretty good about it. It has been a pleasure having you on, Mr. President. Is that weird to call you that? Should I not call you
Kevin, or hey you?
We'll go with Kevin.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Kevin. It's been a pleasure having you on.
Same.
Be sure to check out this podcast and more at cobrt.com/radio-podcast and like and subscribe our YouTube page, please. Thank you so much, Kevin.
Thanks for having me.
Have a great day.
You bet.